Welcome to the podcast sponsored by Vermeer, your expert in hay and forage equipment. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Nick Jorgensen with Jorgensen Land Cattle of Ideal, South Dakota. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here.
Tell me about your operation.
First of all, like you said, Nick Jorgensen, I'm the CEO of Jorgensen Land Cattle in Ideal, South Dakota, which is south central South Dakota, not terribly far from the Nebraska border. Our operation has been in the Jorgensen family since 1909. That entire time, we've lived and operated in northern Tripp County, South Dakota. So I'm the fourth generation to come back to the farm, and I'm in business with myself, my cousin Cody, my father Brian, and my uncle Greg. We're the four owners. So there's third and fourth generation ownership and operation today. And then the fifth generation is almost back. The oldest, Cody's sons, graduates college next year, and his intent is to come back to the operation. So at that point, we'll be a fifth generation family operation.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's common in agriculture, really, to hear about that. But the jump from a second generation operation to a third, only 5% make it that far.
Right.
We're really proud of that legacy. For sure. And in addition to the family ownership, we've got 30 full-time employees ranging between our farming operation, our feedlot, and our cow-calf operation, as well as our hunting lodge. So, just a quick summary of all those. Our main business is raising and marketing Black Angus bulls.
Yeah.
We're the largest seed stock producer in the United States, which basically means that we market more bulls than anyone else in the country.
Right.
Last year it was over 5,250, and this year we should exceed 6,000 bulls that we market across the United States.
Now, does that include your leasing program too?
That does, yep.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, about 2/3 of those bulls that we market are marketed through that leasing program, and then the remainder are sold as mature bulls. And in addition to that bull marketing program, we run about 1,200 cows here in northern Tripp County, all registered Black Angus females. That the genetics in those herds can be traced back to when my grandfather started breeding cattle in the 1950s. So, very strong genetic backbone. And that's really what makes our bull marketing program work is that genetic background and the trust in the Jorgensen genetics that we offer is, what kind of people know. In addition to that, it's the service of the leasing program that we can offer that, really kind of differentiates us.
That's awesome. Take me over to the farming side.
Yeah, so we farm between 12 and 13,000 acres here, also in northern Tripp County. We're really lucky to have a pretty tight land base, so we don't do a ton of, traveling.
Not farming the road. That's always nice.
Yeah, that's right. It is really, really nice. Very diverse crop rotation. Our principal crops really are winter wheat and corn, but we also raise spring wheat, oats, alfalfa, soybeans, and then, quite a bit of different forages, millet. We've done triticale. We've raised cane. We put up a lot of grass hay. About 75% of those acres, 75 to 80%, are dedicated to feed.
Right.
Right. So we're putting it up either as corn for grain, as silage, or as hay that goes to our feedlot to feed our bulls.
You mentioned several forage crops. This is, of course, the Hay Kings podcast. Let's dive in on some of those forages. And one thing I suspect you have a really good grasp on is your balance between grains and forages in your feed rations. What I'm fishing for is thoughts on how that balance is going to be going forward.
Yeah, so it's interesting how it's changed for us over time. We used to corn wasn't something that was super prevalent in our diet. I mean, you always have to feed some corn for grain.
Yep.
But aside from that, we did not put up a lot of corn silage. We relied for years on products like, forage sorghum or cane.
Cane is sorghum Sudan, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Forage sorghum, sorghum Sudan. We're really kind of our principal forages that we put up, almost entirely for silage, just because, products like that are really hard to get to dry down.
Yep.
Right. And so we would chop a lot of that. And what we found over time, as it relates to at least corn, it's for us, it's a lot more predictable in its energy value going into the ration. What's nice about cane or forage sorghum or Sudan is it's pretty drought resistant. It's pretty hardy. I mean, you're going to get a decent crop ton wise every year.
Yep.
But what really varies is the energy and the protein values in that stuff. We'd have some years where we throw out cane silage that was a 45 megacal, 8, 9, 10% protein silage.
Wow.
And then the next year it would come into the bunker at a 30 megacal and a 6 protein.
Ooh, that's a lot of variation. It's
a ton of variation. And that's really hard to deal with, when you've got 12,000 tons of the stuff.
Right.
And you're trying to plan, a year's worth of feed needs. That gets to become a ration building kind of a nightmare for us. And, the nice thing about corn is your tons might vary, but pretty confident that, you're going to have a megacal in the 40s, coming out of corn silage, and your protein values are going to be 7 to 8. Now, it just might, in our part of the world, it might be 5-ton corn silage or it might be 15. But at least, in the ration, it's going to work.
Sure.
No matter what. So we've transitioned to putting up a lot more corn silage, but we also are extremely reliant on dry forage too, on dry hay.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned alfalfa in there.
Yep. We put up and we actually do alfalfa for silage.
Oh, sure.
And for hay.
Yep.
But we put up a lot of alfalfa hay. Historically, we've put up a lot of different blends. We've tried pea and oat hay, and really for us, it just comes down to if we can get good grass hay, just works the best in our ration. And so that's what we focus on is getting grass hay put up. And then, sometimes millet or wheat can be a good substitute, if grass supplies are tight.
We want to get to some of the equipment that you're running. If you're doing that much silage, you have a big chopper. What kind of chopper are you running?
Yeah, we run a Claas 970.
And a whole host of tractors and semi-trucks to move all of that product?
Yeah, the nice thing, I shouldn't say the nice thing is that's a double-edged sword. In our part of the world, South Central South Dakota, rainfall is extremely variable. Mm-hmm. We're just right on the edge of the Corn Belt. And our average rainfall is, 21 inches. But, you might get all that in April and May and not get another rain for the rest of the year.
Sure.
So, just yields for us are lower. Mm-hmm. And they're quite a bit more variable. So we're rarely in a situation where we're dealing with tonnages on any crop over 15 ton. So we don't need quite the truck battery that you would need. Let's just say you're putting up 30-ton corn silage with a chopper like that.
Yep.
You need 8 or 9 trucks to keep that thing happy. We can usually get away with, even in the heaviest stuff, 5 to 6 trucks.
Keeps you going.
Keeps us moving. Yeah. And, a couple packing tractors.
Yep. Stuff
like that. But, for us, we end up probably chopping just for our own needs, probably about 20,000 ton. And it definitely makes sense to have a chopper at that point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. On the hay equipment side, what's that look like?
As far as cutting and raking equipment goes, we use Claas triple mowers.
Okay.
So we've got a set of Claas disco mowers that we've been running that type of mower for about 10 years. You'd be hard pressed to get me to switch companies and style of mower. That is just far and away probably the most efficient piece of equipment we have. Really.
And do those have conditioners?
No, we actually have opted to have the unit that doesn't have conditioners on it. Uh-huh. Several reasons for that. The biggest one, frankly, was it was just less stuff to work on. There's fewer bearings, there's fewer stuff to go wrong. And in our situation, let's just talk about grass hay for a minute. On an average year, we're going to put up between 1.75 tons and 2 ton dry grass hay. Yep. And we don't have a moisture problem, right? So our hay dries down. Sometimes you run into it might stretch alfalfa, getting alfalfa put up right just a little bit. But for us, it's the lack of downtime not having those conditioners has made it more than worth it.
Sure. And you're laying out a full width windrow, right?
That's right. I mean, you're basically going out there like the old style with a sickle mower, and you're laying it flat on the
Just
ground.
laying it
right?
flat. Yep.
So, we can't hay in a day, so to speak.
Right.
But, given the right conditions, in 48 hours, we can have it all put up.
Yeah. Right.
And we've got some stuff on our baler that, that helps that with preservative and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But those triple mowers just are life changing when you go from, you're used to like a bidirectional with two windrowers on it.
Yep.
Where you might be able to lay down a quarter of grass hay or alfalfa in a day.
I love that you think in quarter sections.
Yeah. And, you can throw out 350, 400 acres a day with those triple mowers if you bear down and keep it running.
Yep. That's amazing.
Yep. So that's what we run for cutting equipment. On the raking side, we actually have a Claas liner. It's the four barrel, turnstile rake type of thing. I'm explaining that very important. Rotary rake.
Yep. Rotary rake.
Yep. And actually we have I believe it's the 4900. So we can actually rake up to 54 feet with that machine.
Holy buckets.
Yeah. And, you can't always get away with that. Like, if we're doing grass hay, you can't have it that wide open because your baler just can't eat that much.
Correct.
But, like to put it, when we're putting up alfalfa silage, for example, and we want to keep that 970 full.
Yep.
You take 54 foot of alfalfa, that it still doesn't keep it full, but you're pumping out a lot of tons through that machine.
That's 54 foot of maybe.
Yeah, it's either 52 or 54. I can't remember for sure, but it's 50 plus.
Yeah. And you're putting maybe 2-ton alfalfa into a 54 foot. Wow. You'd think that'd keep most choppers happy.
Yeah. And from a wet perspective, it's actually probably more like, 5-ton wet, 5 to 6 ton wet.
Right.
And you can make a big windrow.
That's pretty cool. That's just cool.
You can get in and out. You can get in and out of a quarter of alfalfa with that setup. 3 to 4 hours. You can have the whole thing done.
Wow. That's
so from an
amazing.
Efficiency perspective, it just, especially when it comes to alfalfa silage, it's really critical that you get the timing on that right, because if you put it up too dry, too wet, and you start to have bacterial problems in your feed, and too dry, and it loses all its value.
Yep.
So there's a pretty small window in there that you've got to get in there and do it right, and that's kind of what we're shooting for.
It's just amazing, the scale of the equipment, and you're talking about knocking out quarter sections in half a day. That's phenomenal scale.
Yeah, well, it's fun to watch.
Silage is one of my favorite things.
Oh, mine too. And we don't do it because it's fun. It's just you do it because it's a piece of equipment like a silage chopper. I mean, you're $1,200 an hour in cost and to run one of them things.
Right.
And so, the more feed we can run through that, and the shorter amount of time we can actually have it turned on, doing something, putting feed up, the better it is for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also, on the raking side, we also just this last year invested in a second rake, just a Vermeer R 2800. The reason we did that was because we got 2 balers going, and one rake can't stay in front of 2 good balers. So.
Mm-hmm. A basket rake.
Just a basket rake. Yep.
You'd use that on grass hay in front of a round baler or something like that.
That's correct. Yep, that is correct. The other reason we didn't go with another big Claas rotary rake is just those are really, really nice, like in farm fields. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where you got terrain that you're very familiar with. It's been worked historically, right? So the ground is smooth. There's not a lot of obstructions.
Yep.
They struggle a little bit more when you're trying to rake,
uneven
35
surfaces.
to 50 feet on uneven surfaces. And
yeah.
You just run a lot more risk of damaging them, running them through a draw and stuff like that.
Yep.
So we still use it, to put up grass hay. It's just you got to be really selective about where you do it.
But a basket rake that's not as wide, and that's on purpose, right?
That is on purpose.
Yeah, that pulls. That doesn't make. I mean, you'd never get 54 foot of windrow into hardly any baler.
Even if you do, you're in a bad situation.
Yeah, I mean that's
super dry.
That's going to be a really bad drought. Yeah.
Yep. And the other thing about it, very candidly, is a basket rake. They're really simple to operate, right?
Yep.
You can put them on any old tractor and go out. You cannot do that with a Claas rotary rake. I mean, it takes horsepower.
Yep.
It takes someone that knows what they're doing, because if you've ever sat in the cab with one of them machines, they're like running a spaceship.
Can you take us through why it's a spaceship?
It's not just hydraulics. There's a control panel, and if you're familiar with Claas equipment, with it being European, engineered European, there's just a lot of differences in the way they design monitors, say what we'd be used to like a John Deere type of monitor.
Yep.
So there's a learning curve on a chopper or a rake like that. And it does take special hydraulic hookups that I can't even really explain. There's just certain type of setup you've got to have to make it work. You just can't put it on any old tractor and go.
Now that Vermeer R2800, that one you can just put on any old tractor.
Absolutely.
And now there's probably some considerations around weight and horsepower and hydraulic flow, but just like even a 4440 John Deere, if we go back a little ways, that'll run one of those no trouble. That's correct.
The other issue that we deal with is with that big rake, we're generally trying to run it with auto steer.
Yep.
Just because we want to we got the mowers on auto steer, we're running the rake on auto steer, and the chopper as well. It enables us to run auto steer in there if we feel so inclined.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't do that on a 4440 either.
Right.
But then on the baling side, currently we own a Vermeer ZR5. We purchased that last summer and put it through about 3/4 of a season. And last year we actually also ran a Vermeer 604 Pro.
Yeah.
Their silage baler that has the pre-cutter on it.
Yep.
And that was actually the main reason we purchased it, was for the pre-cutting functionality.
Mm-hmm.
Because historically we've liked having pre-cut hay in our feedlot, because we run vertical mixers that have knives on them, so it cuts a hay grinder out of the process effectively, is what it does.
Yep.
When you have it pre-cut like that. So we ran that baler last summer, and actually we traded it off, and we're going to run just a standard 605 baler this year.
So going a little wider. Now with a 605, you're not thinking silage with that.
No, and we weren't actually putting up silage bales with that 604 Pro.
Right.
They were regular grass hay bales that we're putting preservative on, so you can go up to 28% if you want.
Right.
But the whole reason we got that model is because it's the only one that Vermeer offers that has a pre-cutter on it. And the bales would pack nice. I mean, they were smaller because you're running a 4-foot bale there.
Yep.
But they came out weighing as much as a 5-foot bale. So that part of it was really, really nice.
Let's take a break there, and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
My name is Rob Flowers, live in Whitesboro, Texas. The 604R premium efficiency level is through the roof. Dependability and durability on the 604R has been outstanding. We've had zero chain issues, zero bearing issues. The camless pickup has been phenomenal. And at the end of the day, that gives me more time to go home and be with my family, prepare for the next day, get more done.
Hear the full story at makinhay.com/haykings.
Now, you mentioned that ZR5.
Yep.
The self-propelled round baler is cool. I like the design. What's your review?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Several years ago, man, I don't know, it might have been 4 years ago, when they were first kind of prototyping that baler.
Yep.
We actually had the opportunity to run it. Our Butler, our cat store, Vermeer store, Butler and Pierre, South Dakota, had one that there was touring around, brought it down to our place. We ran it for an afternoon. And, it was at that point, at least in my eyes, it became pretty obvious that we would benefit from one. Several things that kind of made my mind up about it. The first one is, it's an all-in-one unit, right? When you buy a machine like that, you're not just buying a baler, but you're also buying a tractor.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's some economics that go into, the total cost of a ZR5 compared to the total cost of a regular baler in the tractor that it's going to be on.
Yeah.
And for us, it was actually net, it was cheaper, understanding that, we're not going to get full utilization out of that tractor for 12 months out of the year. It might only be for 6.
Yep.
it still made more sense for us to go ahead and go for that self-propelled unit. And basically what it did for us was it added a tractor to our fleet, right? Freed one up.
Yep.
So, that was kind of the high level economics. As far as performance goes, like I said, when we had it out to demo it 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, the first and most obvious thing was, man, they are efficient, right? You can sit in there in that cab, and the right field conditions, you're baling it at 12 mile an hour.
Hey-o. That's moving right along.
And when you're moving along, now listen, I'm not going to advertise that you can do that all the time.
Right.
Right. But when
if you're talking about
right,
if you're talking about pastures where it's rougher, smaller fields, you're just not going to make that. Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, that's tougher. But when the conditions are right and you're in the right place, you can really, really cover some ground. So, that was a big benefit. And, personally, I can't say, how much of that has to do with, because it's just a regular 605 baler, right? Yep. Basically just attached to the tractor. It's been a long time since we have ran Vermeer balers until these last couple we've bought. We ran John Deere balers. We ran New Holland balers for years, since I was a kid. Right. So I can't say that change in efficiency is just going from a different company's baler to a Vermeer baler, or if it's going from a pull type Vermeer to a ZR5. Now I've got a little bit of experience there because we ran the 604 Pro against, the ZR5 last year. And we did see that ZR5 was more efficient. It would get more done. And I think a lot of it just has to do with, you can even go a little bit faster just condition wise, because even in a smooth field, sitting in the cab of a tractor, you're going to get bounced around a little bit. And that just doesn't happen in a ZR5.
That speaks to the operator comfort, right?
Operator comfort. I mean, that's a operator comfort in that rig throughout. You can tell they focused on it. So, you've just got the cab where you're not bouncing around as much. The other benefit is you're not turning your head all stinking day long, right? Because that baler is right beneath you. You've got a camera looking down on your pickup, so if you're looking forward. Yep. Which makes a difference. And then the other one too, and I can't state this exactly like down to the second, but your wrap time. So we're net wrapping all of our bales. Your time from stop to start on a wrap cycle is faster on a ZR5. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you cut, let's just say you cut 5 seconds off a wrap cycle. Oh yeah. And you're making 300 or 400 bales a day with a machine like that. Yep. That's a couple hours. Right. That you're not sitting. So that faster wrap cycle is really, really, really nice in my opinion. And then that, the auto stop and turn feature for us has really added to efficiency as well, because the main way we pick up our hay is with a Farm King 14 bale, dual arm hauler behind a tractor. Yep. And when they're turned sideways, you're just going up and down the field. Right. In the direction that everything was cut and laid out. So if there's any ruts, you're not bouncing across them, you're going with them. All of those things, right? Yep, that's correct. And, we actually, on our, not the last John Deere baler that we ran before these Vermeers, but the model before, we actually had one that had the accumulator on it. Oh, yep. Where you could accumulate 3 bales per when you actually dropped them. Yep. The idea there was it would be more efficient to go pick them up. Well, what we actually found was it was less. Really? Because so and it all goes down to the equipment we're using. With the Farm King bale hauler like that, you've got cycle time on that arm. And what we found out was you were limited by the cycle time on that arm. Yep. Where you're sitting there. All right, I'm not waiting to go get to a bale. I'm waiting for this arm to move. Yep. And then the other thing we'd find is if you didn't have those bales lined up perfectly straight, to take a couple shots at it. Yeah. You got to take a couple shots, and you're backing up and you're moving around. Yeah, that sounds terrible. It was actually it was a downside having them stacked so close together like that. Yep. Whereas you just take a baler and you turn that thing sideways and they're spaced out every 150, 200 yards. Yep. You're moving. Gives time for the arms to go up and down on the bale loader. Yep. Yep, and you got time to adjust. Just all around, it's a better deal. The other thing that I really like about the design of that machine is when you have nothing in front of you. You've got that wide windshield. You're looking straight down at the ground. We put preservative on all of our hay, a non-acid preservative.
Yep.
We had a lot of space to mount a tank on the front of that machine and still not obstruct a ton of vision.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Easy for tank mounting and for all the gauges and stuff we need for that. It was very easy to set all that up. Really, the whole setup was just a lot easier because traditionally when you run around preservative, ours is kind of it's a higher dose. You're putting about 8-10 pounds a ton on.
Oh, sure.
And so it takes a big tank, which generally means you got to mount that thing on the front of the tractor. Well, then you're running hoses all the way underneath the tractor, and you got wiring going everywhere. This is just a tank, 3 or 4 foot of hose back to the pickup, and you're good to go.
That's better for sure.
And then the standard stuff, the integrated moisture monitor, which you're going to get on any Vermeer baler, is just really, really nice, especially when you're running preservative because you can dial it in off that. And then the scales too. Scales are really, really nice. We really appreciate that. When you're putting up, let's just say 15 to 18,000 bales a year with a machine like that. For inventory purposes, it is really, really nice to know that my bales weigh 1,700 pounds and not 14.
Oh yeah. Again, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
A small change in that bale weight is like a small change in the net wrap cycle time. It really adds up.
It does add up. But, when you're just talking about that many reps, that many bales, it's the little stuff like that starts to make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the learning curve when you transitioned from the standard baler to the ZR5?
There is not much of a learning curve, to tell you the honest to goodness truth, other than just, maybe getting used to a couple different bells and whistles in the cab. Going from, say, a John Deere tractor that's pulling that baler, we're used to the tractor operation of a John Deere tractor. That's what we run on our operation, to a wholly different kind of cab. I mean, there's just a learning curve on the controls and stuff like that. But as far as baler operation and stuff goes, when that unit showed up, Vermeer and our dealer came down for an afternoon just to, make sure all the bugs kind of got out of the thing.
Yep.
But once we got the bugs out, there was not much of a learning curve to that baler. If you know how to run a baler, you're not going to have any trouble running a ZR5.
And then how soon after running the ZR5, after starting to run that ZR5, did you see the difference in productivity and efficiency?
So we ran the ZR5 and our other 604 Pro largely together. So, I mean, the difference was immediately obvious. Just because you had a perfect case study there of running 2 different types of baler in the same field on the same crop.
Yep.
Where we could really tell the difference.
In your conditions, have you got to the point where you needed to replace the sides in the baler?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
Do you think that seems to me to be a really cool feature to have replaceable sides? Like a round baler with wear parts is interesting to me.
Yeah, no, and we talked about it. The other really cool thing about that baler is, it's a self-propelled deal. It's all one unit. It is surprisingly easy to get that chamber out of that baler.
Huh.
Surprisingly easy. I mean, I've never had to do it. I've watched the team do it. And so, the other nice thing about the life of that machine is, when we want to talk about when that, let's just say you get 25, 30,000 bales on it and you're faced with, all right, I either need to replace the wear parts or I need to get a new unit.
Trade up. Yep.
You keep the power unit, you drop the baler out and they send you a new chamber and you just hook up and go.
That's pretty cool.
Right. So from like a trade perspective, even when you think about the unit you actually need to trade regularly, it's actually the chamber itself is more affordable than buying a new pull type because you don't have the chassis, you don't have all that additional stuff. You're literally just buying the chamber.
So what we're talking about here, Vermeer responding to the difference between the emissions components that the engine and emission components that really don't wear out. There aren't really bad engines anymore. On the occasion, there's manufacturer problems or defects or bad serial number lots or whatever, right? But by and large, there's no bad engines anymore.
Yep. Other than, like, what you'll find, and we see this just with any newer tractors, your engine's fine, your transmission, the hardware, if you will, of the tractor
Yep.
stays fine. What you generally end up dealing with is your electronics start to wear out.
Yep.
That's the risk. And not to counter your point there, but engines don't give out.
Right.
We don't have that happen.
Yeah.
Very rare. It's
rare.
more of, hey, I've got wiring problems now that I've got to deal with. But you're 100% right. Is they've separated that to where we effectively, you don't have to trade that tractor every 2 to 3 years.
Right.
With it. You keep that as long as it stays good, as long as you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And in a limited use situation like that, where we're only running that thing from May 1st to September 1st, or maybe October 1st if we're putting up stocks.
Yep.
You're not putting that many hours on it. The tractor lasts a long time.
Yeah. But
swap the chamber out and
that separates the well, I said earlier, you have two components to the machine, the one that's designed and regulated by the government, and then the rest of the machine.
Yep.
That design pretty well separates those two components.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool.
Yep, I agree.
That just seems to me to be the way the industry needs to go.
Yeah, you wanna know what I think would be cool, and this is just me, thinking about a way to make an investment in a unit like that even more effective.
Yeah,
is we're using that thing from May 1st to, like I said, September, October 1st, and then we park it. And if you really wanted to sit down and talk about, what we could do to utilize that machine year round, the way they made that chamber removable, it'd be cool, if someone came up with the idea of mounting a snowblower or something,
right.
The thing. So you can unhook the
Turn
baler
around and go
hook
the other,
something else on and figure out some way to make use of that power unit that, really is built to just kind of plug and play with the tool they built for it.
Yep.
It'd just be neat if there was another tool that you can plug and play with it so you can make use of it, but definitely not a requirement.
Yeah, right. That's a very purpose-built piece of equipment. Yeah.
Yep.
What would you say to hay producers who have looked into the ZR5 for their operation, but they're still on the fence about it?
To me, it comes down to economics.
Yep.
Right. But if you're to that point, right? So if you're already to that point and you're debating to yourself, hey, should I run a pull type or, get a ZR5? In my opinion, ZR5 it's a more efficient machine. And, a big part of that is operator comfort, which sounds kind of silly, right? Like, why would I make a decision on comfort? But when you've got a member of your team asked to sit in that baler for 60 or 90 or 120 days straight, not having your neck turned around 7 hours a day
makes a huge difference.
It makes an efficiency difference.
Yeah.
Like, you will get more done because you're more likely to keep someone in the cab.
Yep.
Right. And just keep that machine doing what it's supposed to be doing.
It's a quality of life component too for your operators. I mean, there's just a whole host of reasons. Absolutely.
And it quality of life, and it manifests, in my opinion, ultimately as efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that just, I think we noticed just observationally is with that improved view of the ground, in front of that ZR5, we had less instances, and I'm not going to say we didn't have any instances, but we had less instances of damage occurring to that pickup, right? Because you're
looking right down on it.
You're looking right down. You can see rocks. You can see fence posts or any other objects. The other thing too that I think makes a difference is the way having that unit actually physically attached to you, right? Where you're operating on the same plane all the time. You're less likely to have damage going through a draw. Because the first question and the first thing about it is when you go through a draw with a pull type baler, you get inverted for a second. You're going a different direction than that baler is.
Yep.
It actually happens. It happens twice.
Yep.
And on a deal like this, you don't have that inversion. And then the second part is you feel it more, right? You feel exactly what that baler feels. So that operator, as he slows down, there's no lag there. You're right on top of. You're slowing down at the perfect point.
Because
where there's not that lag.
With the space between the tractor and the baler, there's there's a lag between what the operator is experiencing and what the
Yep.
baler is experiencing.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying there. That makes good sense to me.
Yeah, and then the other one too, and then I didn't mention this before, but I mean, think about safety as well. When you're dealing with a pull type baler, you've got that 4 or 5 foot long PTO shaft.
Yep.
That's exposed.
Yep.
Right. Whereas on this machine, you don't have that.
Yeah.
You don't have it. There's fewer places for you to go and do something stupid and get hurt.
Yeah.
And I ain't saying it's not possible, because you still could.
Oh yeah, of
right?
course.
You got to know what you're doing.
Yep.
Right. And then, that also comes along with, PTO shafts get bent. Stuff happens.
Universal joints fail. Drawbar pins come out.
Yeah.
Does it sound like I've done
happens.
this?
Yes. Yep. And then I hate to do this to your audio guy, but it's hitting me as we sit here and talk. The other efficiency benefit is, on a machine like that, your 0 turn radius makes a big difference too.
Yeah. I mean, if you've run a self-propelled swather, you understand.
The difference.
The difference between a pull behind and a self-propelled. It is so much more nimble, agile.
Yep.
And again, you have all those same benefits of looking ahead of you, not having your neck cranked, being on the same plane, and especially with a swather going through the dip where you want your header to rock back a little bit so you're not digging into the ground. All of those same concepts apply, right?
Yep.
So it's very analogous very analogous going from a pull type swather to a self-propelled swather. You get a lot of the same benefits.
Absolutely.
Nick, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed your candor here and getting a real boots on the ground review of the products.
Oh, I'm happy to do it. It's especially when you're talking about newer products like this, right? Where not a lot of people have had the opportunity to be around them or operate them. They need to know the truth. All matters are the truth about how those machines work, right? So when you're making a decision about whether or not to use one, you've heard as many criticisms and advantages of the machine as you can gather, right? So you're making a good decision. So I'm happy to share that information.
The other component here is your size and scale is truly unique, and being able to truly test a machine like that in a fairly short amount of time. It doesn't take you years to wear out a piece of equipment, right?
Mm-hmm. I wish it did.
So I really appreciate that. And then your family story is something special too. Getting ready to bring the 5th generation back on. That's amazing. So
something we're really, really proud of.
As you should be. That's something that just very few operations get to say. That's cool. Thank you so very much for your time. I've really appreciated the conversation.
Glad to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you to Vermeer for sponsoring the podcast. Thank you to Nick Palmieri at Palmieri Studios for doing all of our audio editing. And thank you to Jessica Palmieri for doing our social media coordination.